It's funny you say that because I would venture to say more athletes go into 70.3 Ironman races totally overtrained and at the same time woefully underprepared.
Good morning. Where you at today, buddy?
Hey, season's greetings.
Up on the roof? Is it a season's greetings?
Season's greetings. It's the full-on heat, hellish temps of summer. So yeah, season's greetings.
Is today the summer solstice?
It has to be. I had that feeling when I woke up this morning, and I just feeling a bit off, and I said, you know what? Gotta be the summer solstice.
Oh yeah, it's the moon pressure.
Yeah, something's going on. Speaking of the sun, tell you one thing that has kind of caused a little bit of an adjustment here in Chattanooga is that it doesn't get dark until like 9:30.
Oh really?
Yeah. So which you know me, I'm like usually in bed pretty early, but it has definitely changed kind of the landscape of our bedtime routine. Is now I'm hitting like the 10 p.m. Almost like 2 or 3 nights a week. So I'm kind of ready for it to like. Oh, I know we're losing sunlight because it's just hard to go to sleep.
Yeah, you're going with nature. Just like true animals, like a true animal.
Yeah, I'm just an animal, man. I'm just an animal. But
we're all animals.
For all you other animals out there, welcome, Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 288. Sorry, I'm not at the office today.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're not at the office?
No, not today. 287, 88?
287.
Okay, yeah, so roundabout. That's triathlon math, always +1.
I act like I'm some kind of sophisticated statistician. I've got the list right in front of me.
Yeah, well. But yeah, we appreciate you joining us. We come to you twice a week. Most of the times, Monday and Thursday, sometimes other days. But yeah, we've been doing this for almost 3 years. We have a huge back catalog. So if this is your first time listening, we appreciate you tuning in. For the first time, we hope you enjoy the podcast, and feel free to dive back into the archives. We have a lot of good information. We cover triathlon, obviously, but then we also cover life, and most of the time it's just how triathlon and life intersect, and the challenges and obstacles, and the good, the bad, and the ugly that can kind of go along with those. Mike and I have both been doing this sport for quite a while. He is a very accomplished age grouper himself, has been in triathlon for about 6 or 7 years. He's towing what I believe is his 6th Ironman here in a few weeks at Ironman Wisconsin.
Yeah, I was trying to figure. I think it might be 7 actually.
I think it is kind of 7 to it.
Yeah, because this would be my 3rd Ironman Wisconsin. Done 3 Louisvilles and a Chattanooga.
Yeah. So sorry, undersell, over deliver. That is his motto. It's age grouper extraordinaire and coaching this year. I am the coach. I've been doing triathlons for about 15 years, coaching on and off for over 10 of those, and full time here the last 2 or 3 years. So we really do. We try to give you the best information we can, while also kind of blending it in with our own personal experiences, and really, honestly, just kind of truly integrating all of those into the fact that this is a hobby. We do this for fun, but giving you the best information we have that we can, and then let you kind of do with it what you will. So we appreciate you joining us, and it's a busy week all over the place this week. I know we have a lot of athletes on our team that are racing this week, and I think it's just a busy week all over. I was peeking through Training Peaks, and I know you and I will be up at Ohio 70.3 this weekend. Mm-hmm. Great race. And then I was also just kind of skimming through Training Peaks this morning. This will be one of the busiest weekends, I think, of the year for us. We've got a lot of athletes competing at Ohio 70.3. There's a lot of there's the right there where you are in Nashville. There's a Music City Olympic. There's a couple other sprint and Olympic triathlons over. There's the really popular Chisago, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, Chisago Half Ironman, which a lot of our Minnesota athletes participate in. You've got Ironman Lake Placid on Sunday. You got Ironman Santa Rosa 70.3 on Saturday. So it is a jam.
Canada 70.3, is it?
No. Ironman Tremblanc in a couple weeks. I don't think the 70.3 is this weekend. It might be. Mm-hmm. I try to keep things, here in the U.S. as much as I can.
No, it is.
No, I don't think. I think it actually is. It this weekend?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we got plenty. there's a ton of action. So it is. I find it interesting that like this last weekend, it was just like not much going on at all. And then the week before that, it was fairly busy, and then obviously July 4th. But it's kind of interesting how some of the weekends are just jam packed, and some are just not that much action going on. I find that kind of interesting. But it'll make for a busy week for both you and I as coaches, and then traveling to Ohio. But I'm super excited. It'll be a lot of fun, and I look forward to carrying at least two portable phone chargers with me on Ohio to track everyone all over the place. And it's going to be an exciting week. And so if you're racing, good luck, have fun, and do your best.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that phone charger thing.
Yeah, I'll be bringing two. So it did pretty good last at Chattanooga. You were obviously participating. You didn't need one, but
No, I needed one.
Yeah,
A body charger.
Body charger. But yeah, I'll be bringing that, and yeah, exciting week. It'll be fun, and it's just interesting how many nerves go into not just because I don't know. It's an interesting time of year because we've got so many athletes racing this weekend, and then we have, you've got basically huge races coming up for I'd probably say like 80% of people who participate in the sport, because most bigger-ish races for athletes are usually July and after. And then you got kind of the nervousness, anxiety, excitement of also like tackling what is going to be kind of your last training block for big races. Like we have a big contingent going to Ironman Wisconsin, and then after that, obviously you got Louisville, Chattanooga, Florida, Arizona, but we have a lot doing Wisconsin, and I've gotten a lot of nervous energy, chit chat, anxiety text messages this last weekend about seeing the final block before the big day. And it's kind of crazy how fast the year has gone, and next thing you know it'll be September, and the next thing you know people are planning what they're going to do for the next year in 2020.
Mm-hmm. It is crazy, but it's not coming fast enough for me.
No, you want it tomorrow? You ready to get married? Ready to go to City Hall?
I'm ready to go to City Hall, bro. But then I keep thinking about, that's probably a good thing. It's just that it's just such an exercise in patience. You're kind of out there doing some pretty long stuff, and I feel pretty good about it, but I have to remember that, it's like, okay, I'm in a good spot, but it's a really good time to start fine-tuning, just keep getting a little bit better, and stay healthy and stay the course.
It's yeah. I mean, when you've put in a fairly large base, or you've been consistent like a lot of athletes have for the majority of the year, so a lot of athletes look at like what I would consider like your final build or your peak phase. A lot of athletes look at that as like, okay, I'm really just I'm gonna continue to up the volume, base me into the very last minute, and that's gonna be what's going to give me the kind of the best barometer for how I'm going to function and how I'm going to perform and what I can expect on race day. But for most athletes, like I said, like they've been really consistent, you want and obviously this is really dependent as well, like on when you have kind of your last tune-up race before your big one. So we'll just kind of use, for the sake of conversation, because we have so many athletes doing it and you're doing it, we'll kind of use Ironman Wisconsin as kind of our example here. We have a lot of athletes that are doing Wisconsin are also doing Ohio. So obviously their build needed to start a little bit before this last race, because they're going to have a recovery period, and then they're also going to obviously have this last little build to Wisconsin. And by the time Ohio's over, it's basically August, and I think Wisconsin second Sunday in September, so it usually comes pretty early.
It's the 8th, yeah.
It's the 8th, so yeah, it's like a really early one this year. And then you have other athletes who had Muncie and before, so but the main point of kind of your final phase is not necessarily to continue to up the volume, is to figure out what kind of intensity you can hold within that volume. And so you'll see, for the most part, athletes who can go on kind of a traditional build, they'll up the hours and up the hours and up the hours, kind of increasing. Obviously, I talk in duration and hours and volume because I don't do workouts except for the swim. I don't do anything based on mileage. I do it all by time. And so you'll see, athletes work their way up from 4 hours, 4.5 hours, 5 hours. And for the most part, I have most athletes hang around that 5 hour to 5 hour and 15, maybe 5.5. And occasionally we'll do like a 6 hour ride for some athletes. But for the most part, it's around that 5 hour range. But and the reason being is that I usually prescribe, and this, like a lot of intensity within those, because what do you, the demands you're going to have on race day, while you want to keep everything fairly low key, especially for the sake of Ironman, that's what we're talking about, is that, you're going to want to keep things, but you also know, especially given the nature of a course like Wisconsin, is that unless you have the perfect gearing, you're the perfect weight, and you have the perfect fitness, there are going to be times on that course where you're going to have to probably ask more of your body than a zone 1 or zone 2 effort. Zone 3, zone 4. I know the first year they changed over to bar low or whatever it's called. The year you and I did it, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
It was definitely not zone 2, zone 3. I think I remember looking back at my data after I got done. I think it was like my highest 5-minute power of the year. And so you want to have your body adapt to that. But what I'm trying to say is that in your peak phase, it's more about fine tuning and actually for some athletes keeping the volume the same, but increasing the intensity within that to include, race pace intervals, and even asking your body to do higher than race pace intervals. Because what you want to do is you've probably got most of the fitness you're going to have for a lot of athletes here in these next 2 or 3 weeks. But what you want to do is figure out how much faster I can get within that time. And that's going to give you a really good range of, I can talk about cycling more specifically because I think that's the easiest one to ask, in that the reason we do, like for the athletes that I give workouts to, is like when I say 5 and 5.5 hour rides, are they going to get 100 miles on there every single time? Probably not. But are they going to generate enough, if they're doing by power, are they going to generate enough kilojoules or energy or watts to basically get them over and do well on the course that they're aiming for? Yes. But yeah, the final build isn't something where you need to lose patience or lose sight of what you're trying to accomplish. It's meant to fine tune, like you were saying, get in depth, do some race pacing. Fueling needs to be perfect right now. You even need to kind of do your last 1 or 2 rides with the exact gear you're going to have on race day, and hopefully somewhat the same conditions. I know right now with the heat wave we're having, it's kind of hard to do that because, obviously speaking of Madison, it's not going to be nearly as hot, more than likely, although it could be. But it's really important to kind of make things as like race day as you possibly can right now.
Yeah, well, I'm struggling on the bike these days, and that's my jam. But yeah, because it was my buddy was in town Friday night. We were up late just talking. He got in town late, and him and his family, and they were on their way to Florida. So we were just kind of hanging around, catching up on old times or whatever. And they left, later on Saturday. So I didn't really get my Saturday started, my long ride, until, I don't know. He didn't leave till 10. So I really was like, I better not. I was going to go out to the trace or something, but it was 95 plus at that time, I feel like. And I decided, well, I'm going to do the trainer ride. And then I got my power out, and for the first time in a long time, and thought I would do it inside. But I hadn't been on the trainer maybe once this year, so thinking about doing a 5-hour trainer ride was almost impossible for me. I got 3 in.
Okay.
And then I went outside and finished like an hour cool down in the heat. So I felt like that was pretty successful, but that trainer really knocked me down. And I don't know if my power meter's off. I feel like my power meter might be off too. It was like the calibration or whatever.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So I just had a nightmare day with that. But, I'm at a point now where it's like, I feel like cycling is always my most confident place. But I'm at a place now where it might be my least confident. It's weird. I felt like I could have ran both days and keep running, which is good for me, actually. It's a good sign. I'm not taking it too hard. I'm just saying that sometimes these long rides can really get into your head, man.
They are what absolutely cripple people.
I could do the bike. I don't think I could do the swimmer. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah. That's you can do the 112 miles. I'm like, dude, it's usually dudes that say that. I'm like, you're the dude that also probably said you could beat Serena Williams in a point, return, or serve. Like, you're that guy. So stop being an idiot and stop saying stupid things. But it's not just the fact that it's 112 miles. It is the amount of time you're going to spend on the bike, and that's the other thing, like why I'm so against having like these 8 and 12 week Ironman builds that people create where they're doing like 6 century rides. I'm like, do you know, not just physically, but do you know how much mental and emotional energy you're just like draining out of you? Every single weekend, you got to get up at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. You got to go out and you got to spend half your day doing your rides and doing whatever. And it drains the life out of you. And that's also a reason, again, like why I say like I'm not a huge fan on doing 6 hour plus rides, 7 hour plus rides. And it's also why I don't think 100-mile rides are absolutely, because I had this kind of conversation with an athlete who lives in Texas who's doing Mont Tremblant. And I was like, you got to understand, like everybody thinks 100 miles is like this gold standard. Well, you can do a 100-mile ride in super easy conditions on flat road, and it might take you 5 hours. Or I could ask you to do a 5.5 hour ride that's super hot and super hilly with lots of wind, and you might get 85. Now, you tell me which one's better.
I'll tell you the second one.
Every single time. But so like everyone's obsessed with like the 100 miles. Like I have no idea why, but it is maybe because it's
obviously you know why. It seems like the point of no. You got to get there.
112. If you're going to go 100, then just sack up and go 112.
Well, no kidding.
I mean, honestly, if you're going to go 100, then why not? Just why not do the other 12? Can you not do it?
Yeah, because when you got 70 miles in on an Ironman course, you still got 50 miles left.
It's so long.
Or 40, whatever.
That's why people get so burnt out, because they continuously drain themselves on these like 5.5, 6 hour rides where they just noodle around in zone 1 or zone 2 in a group, and they stop like 88 times for a Coca-Cola and some flat tires and a couple Snickers and a water stop, and then they stop for lunch and they grab their picnic basket and they come on back. But it just takes you all daggum day. But that's why this time of year, again, like that's why the repetitive over and over and over again rides are just so difficult. And like I'm much more a fan of accumulating a lot of a specific discipline within 24 to 48 hours. So I know we're talking about cycling, but like for running, because there was a thread on this on our closed Crushing Iron Facebook group where someone was asking about, it's like one of the worst questions you could ask. It's like asking an entire group of random people with different abilities and different approaches and different injury histories, what's the longest run you should do on an Ironman? You got everything from like 15 to like 22, and you got people who are like, you should do a 100-mile ride with like a 20-mile brick. And hey, those are not the greatest ideas, but I'm a huge fan of, especially because you're doing a lot of these things under fatigue, is what can you do within 24 hours? So I'll have a lot of athletes do like well over 26 miles in like probably a 24 to 26 hour period with a run on Saturday and then a split run on Sunday. Same thing goes for cycling. You know that I'm a huge fan of double rides. So like an athlete might do 5 hours on Saturday, and then just the easies, and then with the Saturday ride with 5 hours would have like a lot of intensity and would be fairly difficult. And then the Sunday riders should be more about building, kind of topping off that endurance tank the next day. And they might get 9 hours of riding on the weekend, including like another 3 hours probably during the week. So they're going to have like around 12 hours of cycling during the week. It's about accumulating, because it's so funny. Like I think we should all, if we are going to be athletes that post exactly, kind of do our screenshot of what we did today because we're super proud of it. I also think you should be totally responsible for also putting in what you did the 3 days before and what you're doing the 3 days after. Maybe kind of like minimize those and like fade them out, and then you can highlight the big day you're super proud of, because they are great accomplishments. But I also think it's important to kind of understand that you're only seeing like a day. Because what that also does is like it super stresses people out, because like I'm not doing that, I want to try to be ready, because they love to compare things. So I think it's important to understand that long distance racing is about accumulating a lot of mileage over a long period of time and doing things frequently and consistently, and then adding those things up. So let me ask you this: who would you rather take, the guy or girl who did 100 miles on a fairly easy route on Saturday, or would you want the guy or girl who did 80 to 90 hard miles on Saturday and then another 75 or 80 on Sunday? Which one's better?
Well, yeah.
I mean, the answer to that. It's like the people who got more miles. And again, it's like, well, it's about continuous. You got to do 112 miles. I know that. But when you're building your chassis and you're building a foundation that needs to be resilient and needs to be able to slow down the least, it's not about what you can do once. It's about what you can do collectively together.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with running.
Well, a couple things. And when I talked about, I can't remember if it was the last podcast or the one before, with my double bike. I think it was 2 podcasts ago. But how I went out and was supposed to do 5 hours on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, and I just ate it on Saturday. It was just brutal. I fought through that hilly ride. It was hot, and I had nothing to post there. It was just a grinder of a ride that I knew in my heart was probably good for my toughness and my and then Sunday I wasn't going to ride, and I went out and that first half hour, to me it's that part too. Whether I went out and ended up doing 3-hour ride on Sunday eventually, but that first half hour to 45 minutes was painful. I was fighting through all this, that little section transfers into race. That it's just a toughness, sort of resilience sort of thing that you just can't ignore and you can't substitute for. If you're just going to go ride and feel good and get off and go take an Epsom salt bath and feel good then more, that's great too. But that idea of it is mile 75 and you're starting to really go through it. How are you going to dig out of that? And those are the things I look for too. And the same thing went yesterday. I had a double run. You had me on that 2-hour build feel in the morning, and then 6 to 8 hours later, a little easy 25-minute super slow run at night. With a good break in between. Which one was harder?
For me, it's the second one every single time.
The first 10 minutes of that
are god awful.
Unbelievable. And to me, what it did is it really simulated how I've felt in Ironman runs. And the beauty was that I felt this unbelievable, oh my God, can I finish 25 minutes to, I got through it and now I feel pretty damn good. So it's
yeah, and once you got to minute 20, you're like, I could definitely go for another 30 or 35 minutes.
Yeah, and I was going super slow because I had to at first, and then as I got going, it was I'm lubing up here, The oil's starting to get around, and then yeah, for sure I could have kept going, and I was tempted too, but I was like, nah, that's enough running for today. That's the most running I've done all year. There's no sense in
it's but hey, listen, that's the greatness of the double run. And it gives you a safe opportunity to have done mileage early, and then it gives you that safe opportunity to allow yourself to get that feeling without it being the last 25 minutes of some 18, 20 mile run to where you're toast, you're so fatigued, your form is terrible, and you're going to end up hurting yourself. And then you probably end up walking because your legs are so fatigued, but you give yourself a little bit of time, and the recovery is much easier than it would have been if you had just run an additional 25 to 40 minutes. And so it's cumulative, but these are those you always want to create safe opportunities to give yourself that feeling of what is it going to feel like on race day, because you're going to have that feeling probably on an Ironman run, probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, if not more, that I don't know if I can go any longer. And so your first thought is, if I walk, it'll make it better. But it's usually that's the wrong thing to do. If you're pacing yourself properly, you just need to, unfortunately, I know you don't probably hear this, but you just have to run through it. You have to keep running. And athletes who are super, super consistent, especially right now, are figuring out that, even in swimming, but especially with cycling and running, the first 30 minutes are the worst, at least. And cycling, if you're no longer, it could take it 2 hours. I don't even have nearly the fatigue that athletes like you have right now doing Wisconsin, but I did a longer trainer ride on Friday, and I had intervals, and I had originally was like a 30-minute warm up, and I warmed up for an hour and 15 minutes.
Mm.
And I was just like having that like my legs were just procrastinating. They were like, I really don't feel like it today. And I even like inserted a couple pops, and I was like, yeah, I don't really know. But right now with the fatigue, and obviously fatigue is relative, but once I did my first interval, they were like, hello, we're here. And it's kind of like you had to kind of like smack him in the face and be like, hey, wake up. We're
Mm-hmm.
not, because sometimes I think people warm up. I don't listen, I don't say this very often, but I think you can't really warm up too easy. But when you're in this kind of like super fatigued, and you've put a lot of consistency, and you've gained a lot of fitness, and you haven't had any days off, and you're just building week to week to week to week, you kind of have to just like grab your legs by the shoulders and just shake them and be like, hey, we got work to do today. Or they'll dip into that recovery, like, I don't need to be ready, I can just kind of stay dormant. And I remember that one day you and I rode in the trace together, you were super grumpy for the first like 30 minutes, and you kept like doing like all these like massive surges to try to like wake your legs up. And then finally, after like 34 minutes, they're like, hey, hello. And you ended up having like a really, really awesome ride.
Oh yeah, man.
And so I think that that's like something that people tend to forget, is that like if you don't have those in there, they're just going to keep like feeling kind of like crummy. And I think again, like so many athletes do this when they're not used to having days off, is if you're super consistent and then you take a day off or you have one, you feel like, oh, I got rest, so I'm going to feel great. And then you actually feel worse, because what happens is your body goes into recovery repair mode and starts to allocate all that energy and all those demands to healing up and getting better. And then you just kind of feel like junk. And that's again like why people will feel kind of sluggish and gross and have these like phantom pains and niggles during their taper, is because their bodies finally figured out, okay, I don't have to stay primed to produce again and adapt really, really quick, because it's adapt, recover, soak it in, and then rinse and repeat. And the warm up is kind of the same thing. It's like waking your body up to like, hey, I know you were asleep, I know you were resting, I know you thought this was over, but guess what? We got more work to do today. And then you got to be ready to put in the work. And so I think that, warming up, being really careful with your body, paying attention, and kind of going off the grid if you need to, and what your training plan is asking you to do, if you feel like you really do need it more. And again, like that's such a marker of really great successful athletes, is that they just listen to their body, and they that's the first thing. It's like a different person. That's the first thing they listen to. They disregard, because I'm totally fine with this. I had an athlete comment on this over the weekend, that he cut something short or whatever because something wasn't feeling right. And I was like, good. Like, you should listen to your body first and foremost before you listen to anybody else. Before you listen to your brain, before you listen to your expectations, before you even like listen to the exact prescribed workout, you need to be able to govern yourself, think objectively, and be kind, and listen to your body and what it's asking you to do. And then most importantly, what it's telling you it needs. And if you warm up for 20 minutes and you're not quite ready yet, then warm up longer. It's not like you're going to get the same adaptation, if not better, if you do it later on in your ride, for a lot of athletes. And so you just have to be able to kind of, with the heat and with the training, with the increased volume and with maybe even added intensity, you have to be ready to kind of take things as they come, and then listen to your body. And when it says, hey, Mike, hey, Robbie, I think I'm ready, then you go. But you don't need to just totally ignore it and force things, because that's when injuries happen, that's when burnouts happen, and that's when you dig a hole you can't get out of.
Mm. Yeah, that's a reason why I absolutely love that build feel ride or run yesterday. The idea of kind of like, really, I was simulating the beginning of my race in my mind. I was trying to start out super slow, kind of that warm up, let it feel, and then just start inching it all the way up. And that really pays off for me. And I think that's, I don't want to say underestimated, but I think we know it and everybody talks about it. But if you go out, too fast, you're going to wreck your race, most likely, the run. But I have a question for you, actually, on this topic, because we haven't really mentioned swimming much. I had a thought the other day with my swim, and speaking of warm-ups or or taking your time and things of that nature. I noticed because I was swimming outside at this pool in a lane, one lane, and there was this older man, nice guy, standing right by the end of the lane, and every time I'd stop in a interval, he would start talking to me. And I know a lot of people get into that situation
Not me.
where, you know, I was sort of inviting it a little bit in the beginning because I wasn't really ready to go hammer or anything. And then all of a sudden I got some sets in and he was there again and started talking a little bit longer and longer. And I was going to do, because I'm still building my swim. I'm still, you've seen me. I feel like I'm swimming pretty good, but I just don't have quite the endurance. And I usually do that by frequency and staying within myself. I don't like to go out and go from 1,500 to 2,000 and just knock out a 5,000, day, because it can really wreak havoc with me. But
right.
So I've been slowly building up, and I was going to go, I'm going to do about 1,500 a day and just kind of come back tomorrow and whatever. And he started talking to me, and so my breaks got longer. And then, but I was doing 200s, and I noticed that when I started, I was swimming really well again and under control and strong and long, and I had really good intervals, and I was just taking a little bit longer a break probably than, or maybe a couple minutes versus 30 seconds or whatever. And I really got I felt like I got more out of my swim, and I enjoyed it more, and I was working with good form all the way through, and I ended up doing like 2,700 or something instead of 1,500, which I thought was interesting. And I bet a lot of people do that, was my point. I bet a lot of people aren't quite in shape to do exactly what they're trying to do, and they take short breaks, and they wind up fatigued, and by the end they're just splashing around, like a baby seal or something.
Like a baby seal. Always take more rest if you need it. Or if you're in a workout and you can't hit the intervals, don't just get off. Like, finish the time. Like, what you see is best case scenario. But what your body might tell you that day is that I don't have this, or I can't. Or even sometimes, like, your mind. Like, I have athletes sometimes comment with that, is that they're and again, like, I just want to say this, is that if you're that's like one of the biggest things athletes miss out on, or if you don't comment, is that, like, it really helps you paint a really, really good picture of what's actually going on. And there was even a study I was reading over the weekend that Steven Sauer posted, that, like, the greatest way to figure out if a person is really tired is for them to tell you. Not HRV, not where their fatigue is in training peaks, not any other data-driven artificial intelligence metrics. It's how do they feel, or as I like to text, how's it going? But swimming, and I've commented this before, is that I can usually see or hear about fatigue from athletes. It almost always comes out in their swim, because, and let me touch your rest intervals before I go off on this thing, is if you get a workout and you just don't have that day, then you just simply continue on to do the duration. The duration is almost just as important as the intensity. It's not just, I don't have it today, I have to get off and quit. You need to continue on. You need to finish out as best you can. It's still a check mark. It's still a done. It's still a I finished. It just wasn't exactly how you did it. It's like, I'm trying to get from point A to point B, so I'm taking this route, and that's the best route I can give you. But if you have to deviate just a little bit, but you can still get to point B, then mission accomplished. Don't just get in your car, and then if you get lost for a second, just quit and say, I'm just going to get in the car and walk back. Don't do that. Do the best you can. Take more rest intervals if you need to. Cut the intervals short. Give yourself more rest between the intervals, whatever you need to do for swimming, cycling, and running. But in terms of, like, building up fatigue, and this is obviously something that you're showing right now, is that swimming is so hard for so many athletes, in that it's a whole body workout just like running, but it causes a different kind of aerobic and kind of total body demand that running is, and you can get so hypoxic so quick, and your arms and your legs can fatigue so quickly that your amount of fatigue usually shows up in a swim, which is why I'm also a giant fan of swimming on Mondays. I'm sure a lot of people else do this too, but the reason I love for athletes to swim on Mondays is because it's kind of like a check mark. it's or kind of a check-in for me is we probably had a big weekend. We probably had a big Thursday through Sunday. And once they do a swim, and a lot of times it's just a swim only, or maybe a short run, but a lot of times it could be just a swim only. And let's see how your body's recovering. If you recover really well and you still feel well, and you comment something like, yeah, you know what, I felt pretty good today, I'm kind of surprised, then we can continue on. But if they get in the pool and they're like, I was totally trashed, then you know that this workout more than likely wasn't enough to allow them to recover, so the rest of the week might need to be adjusted, or you might need to monitor it extra closely. But it's the safest of the three to figure this out one. Like if you had a hard weekend, I was like, go out on a 60-minute tempo run or hit the track, you're not going to figure out you're burnt out and super fatigued until you're hurt. Until you just dug yourself a massive hole. But swimming is kind of that safeguard because you're suspended in the water where you can't do any damage. You can't hurt yourself. You can't pound on your body on the concrete, the pavement, or go out and smash yourself on the bike or on the trainer. You're in that water, so you're kind of surrounded. But that's when you figure out, okay, I'm tired. So now it's just the rest of the week before we dig ourselves an even bigger hole. Swimming has always done that. I've talked to a lot of other coaches where they say that that's where they also see the fatigue pile up is when the first signs come in the swim, is the comments in the swim. I couldn't do it today, and their pace really suffers. Like if somebody's doing like a traditional like one in the 130s and you see like a 150 swim, that's when you're like, all right, how you doing? And they'll comment. And usually if they don't comment and you say that, they're like, yeah, I was really struggling, I'm overheated. Or something that a lot of athletes have to think about right now is if you're swimming outside, it's going to suck. I told an athlete last week to go inside because you're basically asking your body to breathe out of the exhaust pipe on a car. That's how hot it is. That's the humidity. That's the dew point. It's going to make things excruciating. So instead of having days where you might be allowing yourself somewhat of a quote-unquote recovering day while keeping your feel for the water, flushing things out, still improving your swim, you're actually just digging yourself more of a hole. And that could be also what it was. Didn't you say your swim was outside?
Yeah, it was.
And so it's just all those things add up. And when you get into these phases where your body, and that's what you do, and that's why coaching can be so hard and so emotionally and mentally draining, is that when you're in these phases, you are pushing your athletes to what you think is the brink of what they're capable of doing. And again, that's why you can't just ask a random audience what they think, because everyone's brink is different. Everyone has a different physical brink in terms of what they can handle, what the time is allowed, what kind of injury history they have, what their weaknesses and strengths are. But then also, what is that athlete's emotional and mental brink? Because a lot of athletes will reach that much quicker than they'll reach their physical brink. And so I just think it's really important to monitor yourself. If you don't have a coach, you don't have somebody to monitor you and rein you back in or push you forward, that you really have to be objective and take such a bird's eye view of what you're actually doing, especially in this time to where the margin of error is so slim that one wrong move could mean weeks off and not just a day off.
Yeah, I want to talk. That guy I was talking to had something interesting. I thought was really, I don't know if it was funny, kind of funny, but he told me he was 83 years old, and he was just doing his pool exercise stuff, just kind of walking around and maybe some breaststrokes and stuff like that. And I'm swimming back and forth, and then I came back, and finally he told me, yeah, I used to play college football. And I was like, cool, man. And he goes, yeah, that was 60 years ago. He goes, I was 22 years old, and he goes, boy, do I regret playing that last season. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, it wore me out. And I said, you're sitting here now 60 years later telling me that? He goes, oh, yeah, I really wish I hadn't have played that. And I was like, man, there's something there. I don't know if it's legit, it literally wore him out for life or something, but I just thought it was something that was interesting to pay attention to as regards to triathlon seasons. Sometimes I guess it's a fine line between, playing it, to the point where you're going to have fun and enjoy the thing versus like burn yourself out. Is that, we talk about that. And it just kind of sunk in with me. It's like, man, this dude's saying 1 year kind of like really influenced 60 years of his life or whatever. So just imagine if you're older and you try and do all these things and too much stuff. Whether it's, just overtraining like mad just because you're obsessed with it, and how that may affect you. It's a game we're playing. We're having fun, and we're trying to feel better.
It's a game we're playing where every influence is always more is better.
Yeah.
Or and this is everything in life, or what you're doing isn't enough. There must be more. You need more. You have to have more. You should have tons of anxiety and fear because you don't have enough. Your fitness isn't great enough. The volume isn't great enough. Your distance isn't great enough. And you're not fast enough. How will you ever be? I'm like, just first of all, shut all of that off and understand that what you're doing is good enough. Because if you can't ever get to that place, then guess what? There is never an enough. It's just more. It's just more reasons and more time to flog yourself and criticize yourself for not being whatever. It's got nothing to do with more. But that is what most people always gravitate. Listen, this is like, I think, one of the biggest misunderstandings about coaching is that people think coaches are to push you to your absolute limits, which they are, by giving you more volume than you ever thought you could handle. That's not the case. The best way a coach can function is to give you the least amount of work that gets you the most amount of adaptation. That's the purpose of a coach. Not to give you, because the fact of the matter is that's exactly what it's about. It's about being efficient. So if I can get you to function great on 16 hours a week versus good on 25 hours a week, you tell me what's better. But so many people think that more is always better, and that's why they end up going into races totally overtrained, totally burnt out. They never periodize anything. They never add an intensity. They always end up having the same excuses on every single race, and it's because they think more is more is more is more is more. 100-mile bikes followed by 18-mile runs are great. 26-mile runs for race day is always great. More is getting better. No, it's about getting athletes. And I know this might sound odd, but it's getting athletes to the start line with the best fitness they could have using the least amount of work possible. Because that keeps them healthy, it keeps them happy, it keeps them injury-free, it keeps them engaged, and it sets them up for the largest amount of success they could possibly have on race day with the smallest amount of margin, or for having errors before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's just like this total misunderstanding with, I got to have more. No, you don't. Just because other people are doing more doesn't mean they have a plan. It just means their only plan is more. And that's the worst possible plan you could ever have, is that more is your only plan. More is the training plan you're going off of to do more, and increase every single time. That's not a plan. Okay? That is just feeling like there's no other way to do it than to always have more. And that's where more always gets you into more trouble.
Yeah. I always talk about how a lot of times in this training, my goal always is to figure out how can I go faster, easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds ridiculous, but I think that is my ultimate goal, is to make this easy. So whether that's just being, with great form and understanding the mechanics of things and understanding how, and being fluid and your body just able to perform at a higher level, and then you can sink it back down to a little bit of a lower level and it feels easy. I think feeling easy is a good thing. Like if you can get to race day and certain things feel easy, that's when you're winning. And I don't think you get that by digging tremendous holes throughout training with the more philosophy.
It's funny you say that, because I would venture to say more athletes go into 70.3 Ironman races totally overtrained and at the same time woefully underprepared. for the demands of the day, versus slightly, what some would say might be slightly undertrained, but peaked with perfect fitness to answer the demands of exactly what they're going to have for the day and be totally prepared. Because listen, this is how most athletes who are usually doing things by themselves, or even with coaches sometimes, because I see a lot of coaches operate this way as well, is that this is how a lot of athletes operate leading up to a race. And I'm going to use the analogy of working for a boss. You either are your own boss, okay, if you're self-coach, or you work for a boss if you have a coach. We've got this huge meeting with our CEO, which is the race, in 8 weeks. So what we're going to do is you're going to come to the office, and we're going to work 14 to 16 hours a day, Monday through Sunday. No weekends. We're working ourselves. We are going to show that we are ready, not by what we do at the meeting, not what we have in this big gigantic meeting that's gonna make or break our entire business, but we're gonna show just by optics that we are doing a lot of work. And we're gonna be here Monday through Sunday. And then so 4 to 6 weeks go by, and a week before the meeting, everybody's like, you know what? F this. I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I don't even know what I'm doing here. I just know that we're working to work. We're not working towards anything. Versus the employee who has a boss or that's self-employed is, you know what, I'm going to work 4 or 5 days a week. I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to stay sharp. I'm going to get sleep. I'm going to increase my workload if I feel like it makes sense. And when it comes to the day of the meeting, I'm going to have my best self ready for that day. And I'm going to have done good work that means something, not just work like they did. Like there's been like a couple articles I've read recently about how they are reducing some doctors like workload and hours because they're finding out, people obviously perform better with better sleep. But that's just like another analogy of like why people think more is always better. It's not, the point isn't to figure out how much more your body can handle. The point is to figure out how best and optimal your body can rise to the occasion under optimal conditions, and you be prepared to deliver on that day. Because guess what? No matter what kind of fitness you think you've gained, if you can't deliver on the race day because you're not mentally and emotionally engaged and you're burnt out, you don't care anymore, or your body is saying, dude, I understand what you're asking me for today, but the hole we dug is too big. And I just got nothing for you today. And that's how people operate, that with their self-coach and their training plans, or some coaches too. It's like, let me drive you into the ground, and then let's see if we can just do anything with this on race day. And so I do. I think a ton of athletes come into race day overtrained and then at the same time underprepared, because it's just been random building blocks on top of building blocks, not specifically building a structure and a specific foundation for one day. It's just been creating something, not something with purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to give you an example, like I know going to Wisconsin, there's a lot of those hills, obviously, and that's why I work those hills in training to make them. My goal is to make them feel easy on that day, and just feel natural. Feel like, oh wow, okay, I'm climbing this big hill, but not stressing out as I'm coming into the hill or whatever. I just turn the corner and I start climbing that hill or whatever. And that's like a goal that I think about constantly. I constantly work at, figuring out how I'm going to get up that hill in a calm, relaxed, enjoyable manner, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's these things that we practice that we can do in training, and this is sort of back to that simulating race day feel, is that you have to do these things over and over and work at them, and then almost even to the point where you get frustrated, where you're like, man, I'm done with this, and I don't know, whatever. Because to me, the best performances come when a decision and an action come in exactly the same time. So in other words, you can't be thinking about everything like in depth and then being like, okay, I got to go up and whatever. Like when you have to react, I guess is my thing. And and the best performance are going to come because you don't overthink too, And that's part of being prepared to me, is just being able to create the ability to react. And I think that's a lot of, like for example, when you put people in the pool and you tell them to go after it right away once in a while or whatever, the ability to kind of being able to react and settle into a swim start that goes a little bit faster than you might want it to go, you got to be ready for that. And the same with like, oh man, I got out of the wrong gear. I was in the wrong gear, and now I'm starting this hill. You have to be able to kind of just adjust to that without overthinking it, and calmly find the place that you need to be.
And you can't do that if you're not totally with it, is the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to be both mentally and emotionally sharp as well and engaged to be able to do that, not worrying about something else or not be totally fried or not even wanting to be there. Kind of like we alluded to in I think it was last podcast or maybe it was last week, is that, which are both, I think, but you could say
Mm-hmm.
that like if you're totally there and like, let's just get this over with, or I just have to make the cutoff of the bike, that's it, and then I can walk the run, then your level of engagement is like on the total end of this opposite end of the spectrum from someone who's engaged on making the perfect decisions. Because I think sometimes what so many athletes forget is that on races that are so demanding from a psychological standpoint, like like the demands of a Wisconsin course, not just the elevation, and Louisville's probably the same, Lake Placid as well, like a lot of them that are really hilly and super technical. I don't mean technical as in like we're going to ask you to descend like the riders on Tour de France going 60 mile an hour down a 90-degree, hairpin turn. It's just there are so many turns, there are so many ups and downs. You probably have to make hundreds of gearing changes on a course like Wisconsin because you're never in the same gear. It's like you're always trying to figure out what is the next gear going to be. And if you don't think that not being engaged and making poor decisions on that course isn't going to cost you minutes, like tens of minutes, then you're crazy. And whether you're trying to compete for a top spot or not, that's a mile on the run that you're giving up by being not engaged, versus a course like Florida where you can probably go on autopilot because you're on flat roads and there's not much to do and there's not too many turns. So what I'm saying is like there's so many things to be considered when you come into a race, and the point isn't to be like so physically, emotionally, and mentally fatigued, because what you also forget is that the training sessions that are leading you to this big day that are going to give you that confidence, if you're just adding on more for the sake of more, then you're not going to have those sessions that are going to mean a lot anyway, because you're already going to be in that kind of like sleepwalking zombie phase of I just got to get this done. I just have to go pedal softly for 5 hours. And I get this a lot of time with athletes who I just start working with, who are doing fulls. They're like, I don't feel like I'm biking enough. I don't feel like I'm running enough. I'm like, yeah, but the biking, you may think that, but I promise you we are. But the cycling and your running we're doing is quality, and you're engaged and you feel good, and we're continuing to improve. You're not on autopilot just thinking, I just have to make it through. Because then what are you really improving? What kind of fitness are you really, really gaining on these rides to where you're having to go a ton slower because you're so tired? You can't hit any of the intervals. You can barely make the distance without having to stop 8 times. But you know what next week I'm going to do? I'm going to go farther. How does that make sense? How does that? But that's what people do.
I know.
How does that make sense? How does that fall into line of I'm getting better and I'm increasing fitness? It's like some athletes I'll leave, like if they do an hour and a half run on like a Sunday, and then the next Sunday they see the hour and a half run again. They're like, well, I need to keep going. Like, well, we weren't able to do these specific things after the run or in the following days. Just because your body doesn't. It's just funny that I think that athletes have this mindset of because you pushed your body to be able to do it once, it is 100% totally prepared to do something bigger and longer and harder the next week, 7 days later, no matter what. If I did 15 miles this week, you know what the body's ready for? It is totally adapted. It's totally recovered. You know what's prepared to do now? It is prepared to do 18 miles 6 days later. And you know what? Once I do that, even though it's super painful and I barely made it through and I had to walk for half it, you know what's prepared to do next week? 20. Just keep piling it on. That is the mode of scheduling that so many athletes take on. Like it's like they're afraid to like just kind of stick to with like so for example, like you do a 5 hour endurance ride on a Saturday, and the next week instead of just doing 5 hours endurance ride, maybe you add in some intensity, and then the next week instead of maybe adding up more duration, maybe you keep it at 5 hours and you add even more intensity. Like those are like little small changes you can make that aren't necessarily increasing time, because again, like I would argue that you're not really gaining a ton of actual speed and fitness. You're just training your body to go the same speed for a longer period of time. But the name of the game is to hopefully travel faster over a shorter period of time, therefore leaving you on the course for a shorter total amount of time. But it's a hard balance. It's a hard balance to find, I think, with athletes that are new or athletes that aren't necessarily totally confident in where they want to go and why they want to go that direction, or even what they're doing on that route. And it's their first one or their second one, they've had friends have told them this, and then when you take, this societal push and pressure that everyone has, I think, to always do more, like people think it's a badge of honor to work 55-hour weeks. No, it's not. It just means you're probably not efficient enough, or you have to, or it's busy work. Like you can probably get the same amount of work done in 35 hours if you didn't stop every 10 minutes and check your Facebook feed.
Yeah.
It's like that's just it's be precise. And again, like it all goes back to getting the most amount of adaptation with the least amount of work. You don't get more props for averaging more weekly volume, because remember, your weekly volume means absolute jack if you can't perform on race day. It's about how you're performing on race day. It's about what happens when push comes to shove. It's not about what you averaged before. It's about what you can do. It's about showing your work and doing work that matters.
Mm-hmm. We just have that natural tendency, man. You got, like, just yesterday, I'm on a 2-hour run. You got a lot of time to think out there, or a 5-hour ride or whatever. And, one of the things you want to do is say, like, you want to kind of tell people, right? I think that's just a natural.
Oh, yeah, dude.
It's like, hey, check what I did out today.
I just did.
But, these days, nothing is amazing, really, if you think about it. Like the minute you post hey, I rode for 8 hours today. Oh, yeah, well, I know a guy who just rode for 24 straight hours, and it's like, oh, okay, well. But it's just sort of, I don't know, I think in a way that tendency to want to do more and more and more is driven by kind of guilt. And I think that's the same guilt that drives people to work 55-hour weeks, just to say that, take pressure off this, like trying to, show that they're committed, or try to prove something to somebody or whatever. But like you said, I mean, yeah, that 55-hour work week could be accomplished maybe in 30 hours if you just went at it. But that doesn't show well to the boss, so to speak. And there's this inherent guilt, I think, that a lot of us carry in life in general that we have to get over. You shouldn't feel guilty about a 10-hour work training week. You don't have to always make it 20.
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, it's like it's the hardest, most difficult part of that entire approach is convincing yourself that what you're doing is enough. Because you nailed it. It's like so many people's are predisposed or have created this narrative that's, you know what, man, like no matter what I do, it's enough. So then why are you doing more anyway? Because even that's not going to be enough. And then even that's not going to be enough. And the 20 miles aren't going to be enough. And then you find yourself running across the red carpet at an Ironman with this huge event, accomplishing this great feat. And then 10 minutes later, you still feel the exact same about yourself. That wasn't enough. That wasn't fast enough. That wasn't good enough. I really didn't do this right. So you haven't done anything. You've continued on the narrative. You've just changed the scenery. And so many people find themselves continually stuck in that cycle of, let's keep the narrative the same. Let's just change the scenery a little bit to make me feel better. Like that's what we do. But it's like, this is enough, and being confident in that and being okay with that. And like for a lot of athletes who are time constrained athletes who are single parents, it's like, dude, or lady, it's like, this is all the time you have, and you're doing the best with the time that you have. Don't rob yourself of all the accomplishments and all the things that you're doing now by comparing yourself to another guy or girl who is single with no responsibilities and works a 35-hour work week, who can put in 20 to 25 hours a week, and they think that's better. Because I think so many people go into races thinking that they're already behind the 8 ball because they don't have enough time. Time is not always the answer. Precision, performance, effort, execution, sleep, knowing your body, and being on the right plan, those are the things that lead to success. Not that, well, they're able to do more. Because we also fall into that excuse. We excuse ourselves from being able to perform well because we already talk down to ourselves that we can't keep up with these people because, well, they've just got this. They've got it all made. I'm like, first of all, you don't know everyone's life. It's just being content with what you can do, and the answer is not always more. It's just not. And I think that's something that we kind of got to get out of our heads, because we see it in so many different forms. People do a race, like, you know what, I can't. One Ironman this year is not enough. I got to do 3. One Ironman is not enough. I got to do 2 100-mile runs and then 3 Ironman this year, and then maybe I'm going to do maybe I'm going to bike across the Midwest. That's not enough. Now I got to do more. And you see these people, and you see these trends with specific athletes, and I'm like, dude, I feel sorry for you, because you're absolutely never going to be satisfied. You're never going to be happy with your accomplishments, because you're always going to be looking for, or trying to justify what I need to do to feel more whole about doing more and more and more, because the hole I'm continuing to dig and ignore is never going to get full from triathlon or anything else, but the answer is always more. And you're never going to be satisfied. You're going to always have that case of the butts where you had this great race, but you can't ever appreciate it because the third word across out of your mouth when you cross the finish line is, well, I did good, but
yeah,
that's I guess is the fourth word. But but I really could have paced well on the bike, or I just kind of blew up. I'm like, dude, just be happy for a minute. It's like, and I think sometimes that's I think people are almost uncomfortable being happy sometimes and content. And more is their way of kind of shielding themselves from having to feel that emotion or what's weird about it, because they're not used to oh, this is what it's like to be content and not have to worry or stress about always feeling like I need to do more. But if we add in more, then it gives ourselves and creates this new challenge to where we have to be engaged on that instead of just being present and enjoying what we already have.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to just add one more thought to that, because there's a lot of times that when we keep wanting to do more and more and more, we seem to stack together kind of disappointing outcomes in these long, like you're saying, I want to run 14, then 16, then 18, then 20, and we stack together these sort of subpar performances in training. Like Saturday, I had that trainer ride, and according to the power meter, I rode 4 hours that day, 3 on the trainer, 1 outside, and according to the power meter that I just kept on the bike and rode outside with, I put in 58 miles in 4 hours, which would give me about an 8-hour Ironman bike. And I know that a lot of times the trainer stuff can be off with that, right, in general. Mm-hmm. But it would have been, and it crossed my mind more than once. It's like, man, I know this isn't right, but still, it's in the number. Yep. And I had to really kind of get into that work mode in my mind to realize that wasn't race day. And I know that has nothing to do with how I'm going to race, Mm-hmm. It was a hard effort. I was doing some good work, and, the race is 50 days away, and this has got nothing to do with how I'm going to race. And I can't let some of these bad efforts in training, or quote unquote bad efforts, or bad results, I should say, in training come into the race with me. You have to let that go. Training is different than race day. And so I guess what I'm saying is, don't predispose yourself to certain numbers, because training is fatigue. Training is a lot of accumulated efforts and things like that just sort of build on each other. And hopefully by race day, let yourself be better than you think you might be too.
and don't define what better looks like until you strap on your helmet and put your running shoes on and get your wetsuit and you get in the water. I think it's just one of the biggest things that get in athletes' way and also prevents them from performing is they already have defined what better looks like. Like, you don't know what better is going to be until you cross the finish line, because you could walk out there and have the greatest race of your life where you perform perfectly and everything went in your favor. Everything. The temps were perfect. You didn't have a flat tire. Your nutrition was perfect. It was that one day to where everything clicked and everything worked perfect. And we've all had those one day, and then we always feel like we're chasing that one day again. Like, listen, there's only going to be one. And just like there's only one fastest person on the planet, and there's only one slowest person on the planet. The rest of us, we're just hanging out in the middle. And then, so that could be your definition of better, or your best case scenario. But then you could have a day where you swim awesome, you have a bike, and then at like mile 95, you have a flat tire, and it takes you 20 minutes to change. And instead of like losing your cool and shoving off the day and pretending like it didn't, it no longer matters, you gather yourself and then run your best marathon ever. That's also your best day. And so just don't go out there with this predetermined definition of what today's best is going to be, because it'll be defined by how you finish and what you went through. But guess what? You can't predict any of it. You can just respond to it in the best way you can by sticking to your guns, sticking to your effort, sticking to your execution, and then let everything else fall by the wayside, because you just can't. You can mentally prepare how to respond, but you can't know exactly what's going to happen on race day and how you're going to feel. So just prepare for that and don't predetermine what better looks like.
Don't predetermine what better looks like. I like that.
Yeah. I'm glad. I try to throw out an occasional good one every once in a while.
Yeah. You do good, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it. You do good as well.
Yeah.
And that is a nice lengthy podcast for Monday. Hey, we appreciate you joining us and sticking it through. We'll be back on Thursday with our regularly scheduled programming. And if you haven't had a chance, please stop by CrushingIron.com and visit our one-stop shop for all things C26 Triathlon and our Crushing Iron podcast, coaching, training plans, gear, our club membership, swim analysis, training camps, you name it, it's there. Peruse it, look it over, let us know what you think. And if you have any questions about what you see or what you don't see, you can email Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always reach out to me, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Wrap it up, box it up, post it.
All right, if you're going to Ohio, keep an eye out for us.
Say hi.
All right, buddy, I'll talk to you later.
See you, man.